Hey everybody, my name is Cody Ernest and our team is We Were Number One. We'll be walking you through the oil change process for a drive-up quick oil change business. I'll get us started by walking through the process steps, inputs, and outputs. You'll see there are a variety of labor as well as material inputs throughout the process, and it all begins with customer arrival, where a customer brings their vehicle to a business and is queued in a line. A technician then checks them in for their desired service and a work order is opened. Once a bay is available, the customer drives into the bay and positions it for the service. Next, the technicians perform the oil change. This is where the inputs begin to need materials in addition to labor, since now there is a need for new oil and a new filter. This also results in a need for the disposal of the old oil and old filter. While the oil change is taking place, a separate technician is attempting to sell additional services to the customer for things like new wiper blades, wiper fluid, cabin air filters, and potentially additional services as well. If the customer decides to purchase the additional services, the relevant inputs are the materials and labor associated with the specific services selected, and the outputs are the completion of those tasks and the disposal of any used materials. Once all services are completed, the customer's payment is processed, they are provided a receipt, and then the customer exits the service bay, opening it up for the next customer. Now that we've covered the inputs and outputs of the process, I'll discuss the process flow in a little bit more detail. As you see, during the first few steps, the car is continually waiting between steps as the customer arrives, is checked in by the technician, and then drives the car into the bay. This introduces one of the first significant potential bottlenecks, which is the need for a bay for the customer to drive into in order to perform the oil change. As the perform oil change step is concluding, this is where the process of selling other services is reaching a decision point for the customer. The process from here will change dependent upon if the customer selects additional services and also which additional services they select. This also introduces an additional potential bottleneck that is dependent on the services the customer selects. And finally, once all the services are concluded, the payment is processed and the customer leaves the bay. Now I'll pass it on to Jacob to analyze the process a bit further.
Now let's look at the oil change process itself. The trigger for the process is when the customer makes an appointment and arrives with the car, which we identify as the flow unit, to the shop to begin the oil change process. I did spend some time at the local dealer and talked with the service managers, and here's a few of the observations that I've made with observing a few of the oil drains themselves. Inventory is held in two volumes. So for your common cars such as Chevys, Fords, Toyotas, they keep a large amount in barrels because that is what they commonly use. They want to keep a large amount and utilize the storage space as much as they can for that. Some of the smaller amounts that they keep for those specialized cars, they keep in the 5-ounce bottles because those oil weights are less common, less used, but they still want to be able to have some on hand for when those cars come in. Taking a look at the time itself to complete the process, on average, takes about 15 minutes for a standard car to get through the shop. So your drain takes about 5 to 8, swap parts 3 to 5, and fill oil takes about 3 to 5 minutes as well. This can vary depending on the size of the car, the type of the car, and the age of the car, filter locations, the amount of oil being drained and used, and as cars get older, they need to perform more thorough inspections to make sure that the process is done correctly and has good quality. When taking a look at your work in progress, or the oil change process does not often have a whole lot of buffers and wait periods. It's typically you arrive same day, process gets done, and you take the car home that same day. So when talking with bottlenecks, however, the service manager did identify a few, and I identified a few as well during the observation, that the big one is the oil drain completion. Take the plug out, you gotta wait for that oil drain to get drained before you put the plug back in. You can swap the filters and fill the oil back up. There's a few things they can do during that time to speed up some of the optimization, which we'll talk about at a later slide, but that was a big one. And then obviously trained mechanic availability and shop space. They have a certain amount to get done that day, and only a certain amount of bays to do it. So they need to be able to get those done, get those through, and utilize that shop space as much as they can to get their work done that day.
On this slide, we're going to look into quality issues and what might cause them, and also the setup times and how they might vary. Some of the issues that we might see in the quality process for an oil change might be oil leaks, over-tightened filters, stripped drain bolts, the wrong amount of oil used, or the wrong oil in its entirety used. Some of that's going to be caused by technician error, but there also is some communication and maybe even possibly miscalibrated tools that could cause some of those issues. So for setup times, you're going to have some setup time in putting that car on the lift, gathering the required materials needed for that, and then disposing of that old oil. You're going to have some variation with technician experience. Some techs are going to be able to do that faster than others. And then also the distance that those tools and materials are away from that operator's bay. Overall, there's a little bit of variation between the different roles in the oil change process. You might have technicians that are qualified in different types of vehicles, and one type of vehicle might take longer than the other, or even that compared to the service advisors. There might be more techs per service advisor because that service advisor is able to do their work faster. Overall, in the steps, there's not a whole lot of buffer time for that flow unit. You might have some buffer time when that customer arrives waiting in line to get checked in. You might have some where they have to wait for an open bay, and then you might have some waiting in line for payment or something along those lines. But overall, we estimate that you might have around 49 or 48 minutes of value added time and at a total time of 60 minutes, which leaves 12 minutes of buffer time in the process.
Hello, my name is Jacob Cook, and I will be discussing the mitigation of time in queue as well as optimizing inventory. Customers wait in queue to receive their oil change until an oil change bay opens. To mitigate time in queue, salespersons should solicit additional services first. This initiative will give technicians additional time to gather the necessary parts to expedite air filter changes, wiper blade installations, etc. Our next initiative is to move vehicles who select those supplemental services out of the service bay as soon as possible. Moving vehicles who do select an air filter change or a wiper blade installation out of the service bay will allow the subsequent vehicle in queue to get into that service bay more quickly, thus lowering processing time. Lastly, scheduling additional manpower during busy hours will reduce processing time and lower time in queue. Inventory can build up as there is a large variance in parts needed to repair countless makes, models, and model years. We all recognize inventory is expensive to store, and turning our inventory promptly is very important. Limiting the vehicles we serve can allow our inventory to turn more quickly. For example, maintaining an inventory of Ford F-150 parts will turn much quicker than an inventory of Fiat 500 parts. Service time does vary on the actual vehicle as well as the needs of the customer. We can reduce variance by specializing in classes of vehicles such as foreign or domestic, luxury versus common, or even brand by brand. Lastly, I'll also mention that additional services are highly profitable for an oil change establishment. This is important as it makes some variance worth the added complexity. Thank you.
My name is Jessica. I'm going to be giving some recommendations for our oil change process. So to start off, when looking to improve this process, there can be a lot of human error. So first, this can be caused by technicians rushing or being overworked. I think this can be solved with providing strict SOPs to follow and giving these visual checks in each bay so that they have these on hand to kind of know the best practice. Furthermore, with human error, communication is something that can be seen to go wrong, and especially between administration and the technician from when the car is being checked in to actually what's being done in the bays. So I think that this can be solved with technician verifications. I think it should be required to have the administration directly talk to the tech and give a second check to make sure that the right type of oil type and filter is being given before the car is even released back to the customer. And then with looking at a better way to design this process as a whole, I think an important part is to reduce down that car waiting time. Want to avoid the customer waiting before the intake and avoid the car waiting for an available bay. I think the best way to kind of go about this is when they are originally even making these appointments, I think it is best to make sure that when the customer is showing up, that there's an available bay so that they're not waiting for that time when they're checking in and then the car is waiting and then the car is waiting to go in the bay. I think that's a process that would speed it up and make everyone more happy. Also, another thing to keep in mind is to have the tech ready with the right supplies. So looking into seeing what type of car it is that's coming in and making sure they have the right parts and oil before that customer's even there. So it's right on hand in the bay and they're not wasting time to go and get that supplies once the car is there and the customer is there. So overall, just looking to make this process quicker and more efficient by cutting down the wait time, I think is ideal. And that was our oil change process broken down and analyzed for Group 1. Thank you, and let us know in discussion if you have any follow-up questions.